rush with the couch on a whim. A little fluffy crazy cat who don't play nice with the kids. You're a danger floof. But I'll keep it safe where you poop. You're an unnatural beast with natural litter under your feet, yeah. At least in your box it's saying no more dust all over the place. Everybody without clay, say meow. World's best cat litter for the world's best cat.
You're a startup founder. Finding product market fit is probably your number one priority. But to land bigger customers, you also need security compliance. Obtaining your SOC 2 or ISO 27001 certification can open those big doors, but they take time and energy, pulling you away from building and shipping. That's where Vanta comes in. Vanta is the all-in-one compliance solution helping startups get audit ready and build a strong security foundation, quickly and painlessly. Vanta automates the manual security tasks that slow you down, helping you streamline your audit. The platform connects you with trusted experts to build your program, auditors to get you through audits quickly, and a marketplace for essentials like pen testing. So whether you're closing your first deal or gearing up for growth, Vanta makes compliance easy. Join over 8,000 companies, including Y Combinator and Techstar startups who trust Vanta. For a limited time, get $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/simplify. That's VANTA.com/simplify for $1,000 off.
Rise up! Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root, from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL Wire site that covers your Arizona Cardinals, and episode 635, recording Tuesday with my co-host, Seth Cox, from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, SB Nation's Arizona Cardinals site. We've got playoffs, we've got off-season topics, Seth. There's not a whole lot going on right now, is there, other than playoffs? And we're going to push the playoff talk down towards the back of the show, but in Cardinals land, it's a bunch of nothing right now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a relief, right? No crazy off-season stuff you have to worry about. We're just chilling and getting ready for the off-season to start, and maybe start to dive into some things with regards to movement and things of that nature. But it's been quiet, and which is for me, I don't mind it when it's quiet. It gives you a break. It allows you to catch up on other things, and we don't have to worry about covering the crazy coaching circus that has been this off season or any of that.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, it means the Cardinals are 100% irrelevant for anything. Nothing is happening.
Well, there's a argument to be made that's quite often.
Well, I mean, like in terms of for the clicks, now is not a good time of year because they're not in the playoffs. Nothing's happening with them, and they're not hiring a coach. So
right, exactly. It's
come on, guys, click on the CardsWire site. Read some articles. I write a lot. It's a lot. I promise. It's good stuff.
You're like it's almost too quiet.
Yeah, I mean we had the college football championship on Monday with Ohio State. Sorry, Seth. I know you and your house is a Notre Dame house. So that was, well, I made it interesting because they go by that. For me personally, as a college football fan, I could not have picked out a lesser enjoyable matchup for me, as I don't like the big, I like Ohio State players. Ohio State as a program, the Big Ten in general, I've never been big on Notre Dame. I'm like, could this have been... But then we have to think about, it's okay. So who's the Ohio State player that the Cardinals are going to draft in the first round? That's the thing I guess we have to ask at some point.
Right, exactly. and there's a couple good ones coming out. They're loaded for bear. This I think it was Dane Brugler, and don't quote me if it wasn't. I apologize if I'm wrong. But Dane that said I had 15 Georgia players draftable, or 15 Georgia players got draftable or drafted off that national championship team, and he said he's going to have 16 Ohio State Buckeyes with draftable grades coming out. So this is, and you figure their best players not even draft eligible for 2 more years.
Right. Well, I was listening to, the ESPN First Draft podcast the other day, and I'm several episodes behind because I start. It's the end of the season with the Cardinals, and I can now start paying attention to what people are saying about draft stuff. And the consensus from Field Yates and Mel Kiper was that Jeremiah Smith, as a freshman, he would be the first receiver off the board, and he can't come out for 2 more years.
Well, and not only just the first receiver, he honestly might be player 1. Like that's just how good he is. He's a freak of nature.
Which would really mean like player 3. He would come off as player 3 because they're only going to do the quarterbacks first.
Right,
so
right.
Cam Ward and Shador, they're going to be 1, 2 in there, depending on who's got those picks where. But and none of those teams. Oh goodness, what a fun time the 2019 draft was when we're like, are they going to take Kyler? Is it going to be Kyler? Is it going to be Bosa? Is it going to be Quinnen? Because we got Josh Rosen. Man, could you imagine? Could you imagine if the Cardinals had rolled with Josh Rosen, considering where he is?
Right, and how bad it ended up being. It's just an interesting dynamic how that always works out, and they could have obviously taken Lamar and then
in fairness, everyone passed on Lamar once.
Oh yeah, I don't blame the Cardinals, other than the fact that I had Lamar as
yes you did, and what sucks now is like of those 5 quarterbacks taken in the first round, all of them were playoff quarterbacks except for Josh Rosen, who's not in the league.
Yeah, and to your point, it's not like it was just a miss, right? It was not like it was just like, you got. I think we kind of hit on this the other day, but like it's not like the Matt Leinart miss where you're like, you got a guy that stayed in the league, hung around for 20 years or 10 years and was a backup, and then no, you just got a bust.
Oh, yeah. And I remember 9 mistakes, 9 teams made mistakes.
Yeah.
I loved Josh. I loved Josh Rosen that first year. He was real personable. I thought a lot of things. I thought he would be better than he was, but I think the stink of the 2018 season left us as saying, well, this guy's got to be good, right? Baker's leading teams to the playoffs. Sam Darnold led teams to the playoffs. Josh Allen is absolutely special. Lamar Jackson, absolutely special. You know what? I was going over that 2018 draft, that first round. There were some really, really good players in the 2018 draft. Holy cow.
Yeah.
Go on that list.
And the Cardinals ended up
and we got the worst one.
That's the life of a Cardinals.
Go Steve Keim.
Well, and it's always just funny when you miss or make the mistake Keim made, right? And the story being that Bruce Arians wanted to trade up for Patrick Mahomes, and he, Keim was like, no, we don't need to, we have it. And then obviously the Chiefs draft him, and then the rest is history. But it's always interesting because it's not the fact that you didn't make the move that was silly. It was that you felt so much stress off missing that you then compounded it by making the Rosen move, right? And then you're so far behind the 8 ball at that point that you can't come back, right? And so that was kind of Keim's whole shtick by the end, was him chasing the ghost of his past misses and what was not done and things that he did not do well and things of that nature. And that's what was so interesting about him, because it was he spent so much time trying to find Darnell Washington and Carlos Dansby over and over and over again, but he didn't draft either of those guys in the first round, right? But
Nope.
but he felt like he needed them again because that's when his defense was special, and it's just interesting how that always compounds, right? And then
Yeah.
where you're at. But
in fairness, that 2019 class has turned out to be pretty good. It's just none of them are with the Cardinals. Byron Murphy is a stud this year, and we saw that in his last year here. But the back injury gave pause, and he's going to cash in this offseason. Zach Allen balling out in Denver. We could have seen that coming. He's fantastic. Now Andy Isabella, okay, Hakeem Butler, but those guys they're balling out just for all their teams, and but that's not what we're going to talk about. We have some recent snubs. The Cardinals had not gotten much recognition for their individual play this season. Budda Baker, though, Pro Bowl selection, 7th year in a row, 8th year overall, made it to the Pro Bowl. He is a legacy pick. We understand that. Trey McBride did not. Budda also second team All-Pro. But that the different types of recognitions you can get. Seth and I were talking before the show. So you've got the Pro Bowl, and people like to poo-poo the Pro Bowl because ultimately, because guys bow out because of injury or bow out because they're in the Super Bowl, initial Pro Bowl selections, I personally value almost a little more than I do the AP awards, the official awards, the All-Pro team, and even the one we're going to talk about, which comes from the Pro Football Writers of America. Because with the AP, you've got 50 writers, 50 reporters, just media members. Not that I have anything against them. That's me. I'm one of them. I don't write for the AP, and I don't have a vote. And then for the PFWA, which I am a member of, and I do have a vote for that. Those are football writers all across the country that cover either the entire NFL as a whole nationally or individual teams. So there are scores of those writers, but that's just writers, not football guys. They're guys like Seth and I who watch it, who have some varied experience with the game, but not in the game, not on the field, not coaching, things like that. But the Pro Bowl, you've got a blend. It's 1/3 fans, okay, like you get the other all-star games, but you also get players and coaches voting. And so initial Pro Bowl selections, I would say, for me, I weigh that a little more. Not that that's what we're talking about, but the reason I bring it up, Seth, is because the Pro Football Writers of America, the PFWA, of which I am a member and have been for the last more than a decade, announced the all-NFL teams, the all-NFL and all-conference teams, and then later on Tuesday, the all-rookie teams. I don't think there was any surprise about the rookies of the year being Jaden Daniels, Washington Commanders, both the overall rookie of the year and the offensive rookie of the year.
Yeah.
And then Jared Verse being the defensive rookie of the year of the Rams. And, they couldn't. Isn't it interesting? Like, we wanted all those pass rushers. Leatu Latu had a good year. Jared Verse looks really good. Dallas Turner, didn't get to play a whole lot in his rookie year, but he'll probably be in that mix. If we look over the last couple of years, the pass rushers coming off the board in the first round are like, man, the Cardinals could use one of those. But that's not what we're talking about. Both Budda and Trey McBride were snubbed from any list on the overall NFL and the All-NFC team. Marvin Harrison Jr. not on the All-Rookie team. Seth, what we have from the safeties at the All-NFL team and All-NFC, because both of the All-NFL safeties were in the NFC. So in both cases, Baker was bumped or was overtaken, was snubbed in favor of Detroit's Brian Branch and Green Bay's Xavier McKinney, both at the NFL level and at the NFC level. And I guess for me, that makes sense. As much as I don't want to admit it, it's hard to overlook especially the on-ball production that both McKinney and Branch had, because both had double-digit pass breakups. I think McKinney had 11, and Branch had something like 16. I think I don't have the stats up in front of me. Branch picked off 6 passes. McKinney had 8 interceptions. They were productive in tackles. And so while Baker had 164 total tackles, 95 solo, he broke up 5 passes, no interceptions, had a couple of sacks. Could you fault the writers across America for putting those guys ahead of Buddha? I believe I put Buddha in. I voted for Buddha not at all NFL level, but I did vote for him at the conference level. I had him and Brian Branch. I did. There was a homer pick, but I did have him over McKinney, which seems like a foolish thing to do now that I look back.
I mean, it's tough because, like you said, while the defense was much improved and better than we expected, it was still, back half of the league defensively. So like you said, McKinney and Branch playing on just better defenses are going to get more recognition. I don't think it's crazy to think that he was more impactful because, he was really the only elite level player that the Cardinals had on their defense, right? So that's, I think what you did was fair, but
Now Taxes is 100% free when you file in the TurboTax app if you didn't file with us last year.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, just do your own taxes in the app by 2/18.
What if I have lots of forms?
All good, all 100% free.
What if I had 3 jobs?
Still 100% free.
What if I once saw Bigfoot?
That has nothing to do with taxes, so still 100% free.
Now that's what I'm talking about.
Now this is taxes. See if you qualify in the TurboTax app. Excludes TurboTax Live, must start and file in app by 2/18.
I always say this, and it's tough, and it makes it more difficult, but it also does come off semi-homerish too, right? Like if you take Buddha off the Cardinals and put them with Branch or McKinney, like who's hurting more? Like what team suffers the most? And I, it's hard to say, but can McKinney provide what Buddha does here? I don't know. But I also don't know if Buddha can provide what McKinney provides, because that's just, like you said, not his strength. It's not necessarily that he's not as good. It's just not what he's as good at, right? So
Right.
those are the queries I always have about situations like this, because I don't think you're necessarily wrong or being overtly homerish. I just think it's hard to justify a guy that's kind of one-dimensional in that sense, right?
Yeah, it's hard. Like on the other side is that because he does something at such a high level that other safeties don't do, it's also, it's a special trait that he has, because he does play with reckless abandon in all phases of the game. He's not bad in coverage. He just didn't have the same amount of play, and partially because of his usage, partially because he is playing close to the line of scrimmage. Jalen Thompson should be the on-ball producer when it comes to hands-on, pass breakups and stuff like that, and interceptions, because that's more of the role that he plays. As a McKinney and Branch played. He went from safety and nickel. He did like kind of the Jalen Thompson, what Jalen Thompson did here before, doesn't he, for Detroit?
Yeah.
And so he's not. So he's playing both Jalen Thompson and Garrett Williams roles, which in the slot you do have more opportunities to make plays on balls. As opposed to Buddha, who's blitzing a lot, you're blitzing, you're not going to be in coverage when he is coming up and run support and doing things near the line of scrimmage, making it so they can play light, because the Cardinals do play, they like one of their base sets is they play a lot of nickel. They played a lot of nickel and dime, but Buda's play near the line of scrimmage allows them to go light in the box because you have a physical safety who can do both things. And so, in one way, now, I guess probably it would have been a smarter way to go would be, like, if I'm thinking about it now, to have gone Buda and McKinney as, safeties. Buda, because he has a skill set and it plays at such a high level that no other safety really has. And then McKinney for the on-ball production. Branch, he is both safety and a nickel, and there was no nickel vote in the PFWA stuff. And there is now for all pro. They have adjusted that a little bit. So, but I get nationwide. I get why he didn't get a spot on either squad, because it's hard to ignore. And especially, and I was telling you this, Seth, before the show, being so Cardinals centric. And while I do pay attention to players around the NFL, to be able to vote for both conferences and to feel like I know so enough about all the teams and all the rookies and all the things like that to really come up with, I have my own evaluation, as opposed to going with what I found myself guilty of, legacy votes, especially because our voting comes after AP teams are come out and Pro Bowl comes out. And so when for example, at guard, Chris Lindstrom and Landon Dickerson, I don't know how well Lindstrom played this year because I saw nothing about the Falcons. And so, but did he get recognized by lots of people before? So I'm like, why would I not do this, since I can't think of a better choice at guard? Of course I pick him. I did make it a point to vote for Leonard Williams of the Seahawks on the defensive side of the ball, who did not get any love on the Pro Bowl or All-Pro team mentions. And he had an absolute monster of a back half of the season. And, the PFWA did recognize him more because he did tie. So there was a tie for that second defensive tackle with, I can't remember what other player it was, but he did with Jalen Carter. I think he tied with Jalen Carter. And so I felt, okay, that we did pay attention to that. But that's about that. But we have our second snub, which is Trey McBride. The all-NFL tight end position went to Vegas's Brock Bowers, the all-rookie, the guy that set the rookie record, had 112 receptions for just shy of 1,200 yards and 5 touchdowns. He gets the nod at the all-NFL level. All-NFC, though, the nod goes to George Kittle, who had himself a great season, 78 catches for over 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns as opposed. Obviously, you're not going to go wrong for voting for George Kittle in that situation, especially with the legacy that he has. He still produces at a really high level. He had 8 touchdowns, which outdid, honestly, in terms of receiving touchdowns, 8 receiving touchdowns. Bowers and McBride combined for 7. Then you got McBride, who had 111 catches, 1 fewer catch than Bowers, and 1,146 receiving yards, which is 50 fewer than Bowers, but 40 more than Kittle. When I wrote about this today, my take was that, okay, I kind of get, I can understand why Kittle would be past McBride at the conference level, even if I disagree this year. But if you're going to use Kittle over McBride in the conference, then you should also put Kittle over Bowers. Bowers, all rookie tight end, 100%. Bowers is your all NFL tight end when his season for a bad team was one catch better than Trey McBride. I didn't like that so much. If Kittle's going to get it over McBride, then I think Kittle should have gotten over Bowers.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair assessment of the of the situation.
And then you go to the all-rookie team, and we should be prepared for this. Marv didn't make it. Now, in one, they only had 2 spots for the receivers. One went to Malik Neighbors. One went to Brian Thomas, a guy, you and I had concerns about, not because of his talent ability, but because he was the other guy to Neighbors. We wondered if he would be more like a DJ Chark, and after 1 year, he looks like a dog with over 1,200 yards and catching the ball, and you're like, oh man, he did really good.
And shouldn't Brian Kelly be fired since he didn't do anything with Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, and Brian Thomas? I mean, it's one of those things to think about, man. I mean, how do you have those 3 dudes and you don't? I mean, you can't do anything. It's crazy to think that. So, yeah, I mean, overall, I thought the teams were fine. I mean, it's hard, like we've talked about, to make teams when you're chasing, and so for them, for there to be no Arizona Cardinals, it makes sense. Unfortunately,
yeah.
You gotta.
I don't fault him for no Marv. After all, Marv had a fine season, but he didn't reach 900 yards. Well, you had Neighbors, you had Thomas, and you also had Ladd McConkey, who had nearly 1,000 catches and over 1,000, nearly 100 catches and over 1,000 yards receiving. They also were the top and really only receiving threat on their teams. And so that is the other part. That's the other piece of the puzzle with Marv, is that Marv came in and was on a contending team for a good portion of the season where he was not the number 1 weapon. And because he had a Trey McBride on the team. Not that's not going to excuse him, but I think had Marv been on another team, I don't doubt that he has a Neighbors or McConkey or Thomas type season. If he had been like the Cardinals had drafted Neighbors, I think Neighbors would have been grumpy here. And Marv had gone to the Giants. You know what I guessed? I'm guessing Marv probably would have put up similar numbers to Malik Neighbors in that situation. I personally think.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see how second season goes, because I do think we get, and we, not you and I necessarily, but we get overly excited to kind of claim winners, losers after year 1. We saw it with Stroud and Young, and now, it seems a little bit more of a competition.
A little more even, yeah, a little more
and
even.
Things of that nature. And so, and then obviously Daniels is leaps and bounds better than Caleb Williams, even though Caleb Williams put up a better season with a coach that got fired. So it's all just interesting how that all works.
Coming up next on the Rise of Seer podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talking Web. Let's move on to an off-season topic, and that is of salary saving moves. We're still a little while from that, but that's coming up next on Rise of Seer Ed. We're back on the Rise of Seer podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk on the Web. Now talking about off-season moves where they could save salary. Not that the Cardinals need to, because right now, according to Over the Cap, they are number 4 in cap space with more than $71 million available in cap space, and number 4 in effective cap space, which is projecting, getting guys under contract. It's at almost $68 million in cap space. We do know that it doesn't go as far as you think it goes. Nonetheless, this is the time of offseason when we start talking about moves that the Cardinals could make and other teams could make to free up cap space for, even though they don't need the cap space, that perhaps resource allocation makes sense to do it. And it was interesting, and you and I have mentioned this on this show. The moment Budda Baker was given that extension, we both believed that, and I said many times, I don't think that Jalen Thompson will be on this team next year. And when Over the Cap said, mentioned Jalen Thompson as a potential cut candidate, I saw the reaction from fans on your site, on SI, on social media. Man, people weren't happy with that. Why would they cut him? Well, here's the fact of the matter. He has no guaranteed money left on his contract. He's due to make, now in terms of cash, he's going to make $7.5 million next year. Not that, that's reasonable. His cap hit is $13.7 million, and you can move on from him and save $6.5 million against the cap. As things stand right now, they will have between him and Budda over $23 million, over $24 million, $24.5 million tied up in cap space for 2 starting safeties. That we've talked about that before. While they don't need the cap space, that's not a great use of capital, is it?
No, it's not. And it's one of those things that, like you said, we've discussed it. It's tough to explain this and make it understandable, right? Because good players and things of that nature, but when you're talking about just safeties in general, one, with the changeover, right? Jalen Thompson's or with Budda's extension, I guess we should say, Jalen Thompson is now the 3rd highest paid player on the Arizona Cardinals. The 2nd highest paid player, will we even see him next year? Like how much?
That's one of the guys to talk about is Jonah Williams. But now for me, with what Jalen produced last year, he didn't have a bad year, but he didn't have a top safety type year in terms of production. And while he does provide his skill set, and what Vance Joseph really liked about him is that he does erase big plays. Like if there's a bust in a run fit or in coverage, he can turn that. He erases what could be, for in other situations, a 40, 50, 60-yard play into a 15 to 20-yard play. He's good at finishing and taking things down. But in terms of production, you can save $6.5 million, but you get the same effectiveness by rolling with, say, Rabbit at that same position, and then using a guy, as terrible as it sounds, like Andre Sacheret, to play in that 3rd safety role. And would your production defensively change?
Yeah, that's the tough question, right? Like if you move on from a safety that was, let's say, average, right, in terms of a production this year, how much are you losing? And to me, that's the biggest question that you have to ask and answer. And to me, the answer is, I think it's negligible. If Thompson played at like a Xavier McKinney level last year,
well, that's a different story,
right? But what he did play at, you look at and you go, well, this is not, this isn't. Again, I hate saying it like this, but this isn't worth what you're paying.
Right. Especially when you could, even though you've got lots of cap space, it would open up a route to playing time for Rabbit if you believe that he's ready for that.
Well, that's another good question or part of this whole situation, right? Like you've got a young guy that looked promising that is a little bit more of a playmaker in terms of on-ball production. And then you're going to save, $7.1 million on top of it. Why not go that route? Why not think about that? So that's why it's an interesting way to look at it, because it's not cut and dry, but at the same time, it is one of those situations where sometimes you have to start moving on.
Yeah. Interesting with the guys that do some of the biggest cap hits. They might not be able to do a whole heck of a lot, mainly because a lot of the guys near the top still have a good chunk of guaranteed salary. Justin Jones, $5 million of his $7 million in salary, fully guaranteed. He's going to count 11.3 against the cap. Sean Murphy Bunting, $4.5 million of his $7.7 million salary is fully guaranteed. He's going to have a $10 million cap hit. Bilal Nichols, all of his salary of his $5.7 million salary is fully guaranteed. So even though all three of those big free agent or the biggest free agent additions have guaranteed money, which is going to make it really, really hard for them to be moved on from. Now, the one guy, and Howard wrote about it for Cards Wire, is Jonah Williams. And this is not about production, but it is about risk. He's due to have a $16.06 million cap hit in 2025. He's due $10.78 million. Currently, he has $2.5 million in guaranteed salary for injury alone. Tricky spot there. If he's on the roster 5 days after the offseason, after the new league starts, he's due a $1.5 million roster bonus, and his salary, his 2.5, the injury guarantee salary, becomes a full guarantee. It's tricky right now because we don't know where he's at in terms of his knee. So maybe he's healthy before then. You can move on from his deal. It's a significant dead money hit if you just take the pre-June 1st cap hit of $13 million to dead money, but you do save $3 million. And that, if you carry it to post June 1st, you can save $10 million in cap space if you push it as a post June 1st. The question is, Seth, do you move on from Jonah when you don't have necessarily right now someone you can trust? There's not a lesser expensive, reliable option on your roster. I don't think we can believe that Christian Jones is that guy yet. Calvin Beachum is a free agent. Jackson Barton, he's a free agent 1 and 2. Guess what? Both times he's gotten to play for a game or so, he's gotten hurt. So it's not like you could count on him. What would you do for this Jonah Williams scenario?
It's tough, man. I mean, I think the unknown of his health is the biggest thing. Like, when is he going to be ready? When will he be back and able to play and contribute? And so that's the first thing that you have to look at, right? That being said, you don't have Kelvin Beachum, right? So
you could re-sign him, and maybe that's the move that you make. You keep Jonah, you re-sign Beach,
but
and you're
but it's probably a wash, right? You're probably going to give Beach that $3.1 million.
Yes.
Right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. You could just sign Beachum, roll with Jonah, and then you've got starter level replacement. Because otherwise the move you have to make is cut Jonah Williams, save only $3 million, and then who are you paying?
$3 million, yeah.
Or to replace him, you're going to pay far more than $3 million.
Right, exactly. So yeah, so those are all,
unless they draft the kid out, the tackle out of Ohio State,
right?
And you've got Ohio State bookends. What is it, Simmons?
Yeah, and so there's a couple other ones though that we can, look at. I don't think any of these make sense, but that you can look at. The first one would be DJ Dallas.
Yeah, that one that's the one you actually save a little money because there wasn't much guaranteed. You only take 2/3 of $2million in dead money, and you save 2.4 million. I mean, if you like the running back room, but remember what they said about DJ. He's one of the alphas in there, like in terms of just the locker room, special teams. The energy brings the locker room. Interesting. That's an interesting bit that Jonathan Gannon has said many times about DJ. But you could save money there.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. Like those are, I mean, you don't really have a ton. I mean, we can throw out names that nobody's going to know, right? I mean, Nick Leverett.
Yeah, well, and even at that, right? Nick Leverett, one of the guys that signed to the futures deal.
Right.
So yeah, Nick Leverett, but now we're starting to reach the level because like minimum salaries for a certain level, like Nick Leverett's making 1.17 million.
Yeah,
That's
1.1. Yeah,
that's almost nothing.
And that's what the question becomes, right? Because after that, so Dallas is really the only guy. Michael Carter at 1.2 million, but Dallas is really the only guy outside of. It's crazy to think about it this way, right? So these are the moves you can't in basically descending order. Jalen Thompson, you save about 6.5 million. Trey McBride. You could
save 5.2 million.
But also with McBride, I'm gonna guess his cap hit goes to like 0 or very little, kind of like Buddha's is this year, right? Because you're probably gonna extend him this offseason. But again, just for the exercise, that's the next guy. And then the next guy is DJ Dallas. Or I guess it's Jonah.
It's Jonah, then DJ. And after that,
it's negligible, right? It's $1 million here and there. Like that's the old Cardinals way, right? Like let's pinch $1 million here to save $1 million there. So it just makes it difficult because how do you get there? And like you said, Jalen doesn't need to go. So that's, I think, the big thing you have to like acknowledge. Like there doesn't need to be a whole like, oh, Jalen's got to go situation. So if you think you can utilize that $6.5 million elsewhere, right tackle,
yeah.
Then and that's the thing.
Guard.
Right.
So here's the thing. If you like, I am more of the belief that ultimately Thompson will end up being traded. I believe because his contract isn't, especially when you trade to someone, that $7.56 million salary that's non-guaranteed. Guess what? That's for an average, at least an average safety who can play to a near Pro Bowl level at his ceiling. That's a good deal. If the Cardinals aren't going to get much for him, you might get, a 4th round pick, maybe. But if you can move him for a draft pick, and you believe that Rabbit can do it, well then sure, why not? I don't see him ultimately getting cut. I think he's more likely to be traded.
Yeah, and that's where I would go with it too. But you have to have a willing trade partner, and
that's true.
I mean,
Denver, send him to Denver.
Right. Will somebody give up a 7th round pick for him?
7th round picks.
Because that's the other thing people have to realize is that a guy that's going to cost, 6.7 million isn't necessarily a hot commodity either, right?
No, and when you make a move like that, there's always the assumption that there's going to be an extension as well. So
right.
So maybe I should look at Denver's situation at safety because Vance Joseph would love Jalen Thompson. You know it. Vance loved Jalen. But anyway, coming up next on the Rest of Your podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk the Web. Let's talk about the playoffs. We've got the Final Four. Let's react to the to the divisional round games. That's coming next on Rise Up See Red. Back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. We have our final 4 teams. The NFC title games are set. And there was only one road team winning. The Washington Commanders pulling up the major upset over the Detroit Lions. And then technically the Bills pulled off the upset as home underdogs, slide unders, 1-point underdogs over the Ravens. Were you surprised? Was there anything surprising for you over the weekend?
I mean, obviously the big one, the way that the Lions defense played, but we had talked about that a little bit, right? Like,
yes,
we talked about how outside of that Vikings game, the defense had been bad.
And it was honest. Yeah, that was the thing, is because Detroit's offense had been playing so well, they were able to withstand it. And what it came down to in this game is they lost by 2 touchdowns and were -5 in the turnover battle. If they turn the ball over twice instead of 5 times, Detroit probably wins this game.
Yeah. And you just look at it. I mean, and I don't know the exact game that Aiden Hutchinson got hurt, but since week 12, they gave up 20 to the Bears, and you might be thinking, well, that's not a lot, but over 300 yards. They gave up 31 to the Packers, over just under 300 yards. They gave up 48 to the Bills, 559 yards. They gave up 17 to the Bears, but 382 yards. They gave up 34 to the Niners, but 475 yards before that Vikings game, where you were like, okay, they're putting it together. And now, obviously, hindsight, it was no, Sam Darnold had turned back into the pumpkin. And so I think we knew that the defense, like you said, was going to struggle in this one. Not nearly as bad as they did, 481 yards, but like you said, and I've written about it ad nauseum. It's never going to click for people, but it is what it is. You can't lose a turnover battle like this, and you definitely have to force turnovers, right? So you can even withstand 5 turnovers if you force a turnover from the other team, but like when you're not forcing any turnovers either, it just becomes an issue. And that's something that we saw from this team, because I go back to that Texans win, right? 5 turnovers for Goff, or I think it was 4 interceptions, but they forced 2. And they stuck by.
They won. Yeah, that comes down to that. Jaden Daniels looking fantastic, looking so great. I want to make sure he stays healthy, repeats that next year. But I mean, when we were going into that, we both expected Washington. We didn't, like, the 9.5-point spread was wild, honestly, for the way Detroit had been playing defensively. The 9.5-point spread to me was wild, and so I expected this to be a competitive game. I did not, in my wildest dreams, predict a 2-touchdown win by Washington, but exciting. Kansas City, Houston, very big sad face to those who placed their bets about 30 minutes before kickoff, when the spread went from 8.5 to 9.5. Sad. That's a bad beat with that safety that the Chiefs took at the end. I wasn't worried with the -8.5, but this game, Houston did basically, like, what else could Houston do? They held the Chiefs to 212 yards of offense. They didn't turn the ball over. They also didn't take the ball, but they stopped. They went 10 for 17 on 3rd down and still lost by 9. Like, if you were watching the play on the field, you're like, okay, Houston's playing well. They just couldn't do anything. And then, of course, Kaimi Fairburn, turned into a pumpkin himself. He missed a field goal. He missed an extra point and had a field goal blocked. And this was just a case for me. Like, the Chiefs, they have voodoo magic. They're just incredible as a team. And defensively, they're so good now. And so Patrick Mahomes did his thing. They didn't do great in the run game, but Travis Kelce, big props to you, Seth, for cashing in on that Travis Kelce. And that Washington game as well, that went really well for the both of us because you had like the one prop that you said will go over Eckler. Eckler was fantastic. I got my Zach Ertz anytime touchdown, so that worked out really well. So we had a good weekend in that sense, but yeah, this went roughly as I expected it to be. That ultimately the Texans wouldn't be able to hang with the Chiefs, even though they were able to hang with the Chiefs, if you know what I mean.
Well, and they got to get in the end zone. I mean, you can't just score 14 points and expect to win, even when you outgain your opponent, like you mentioned, right? And that's been the issue for a lot of teams, and we've seen it with the Cardinals.
Like Cardinals,
you got to get in the end zone more consistently. You got to find a way to score points.
8 sacks though, holy cow! And remember when people talk about how George Karlaftis would have been a bust? He's so good.
Yep.
Oh man, he's so good.
Oh yeah.
Oh man.
What do you make of the Matthew Stafford? Do you think that was his last game?
I don't know. If you look at what he did over the last part of the season, I could totally see it. Like but then again, like his comments after the game were not one of because reporters asked him what he was talking about his future. Like, what? He just finished a game 15 minutes ago. Now he did give the standard. I'm going to give it some thought, but he sounded like a guy that still plans on playing.
Yeah, and it was interesting in this game. I mean, he was the better quarterback, and we've talked about that quite a bit with the Eagles and Jalen Hurts. He doesn't have to do a whole lot. Their team in general doesn't have to do a whole lot with the passing game. You saw it again, 285 yards and rushing and 3 touchdowns. I mean, to lose the production battle, but in total yards by 50.
Turnovers again, man.
Yeah, yep. They fumbled 3 times, lost 2. The Eagles fumbled twice, didn't lose them. But you can't. I mean, and don't get me wrong, Saquon Barkley. I struggled why Barkley didn't get more chatter as an MVP with the season he had, and he's just kind of continued that in the playoffs, right?
Yeah, it's incredible. But the Rams did cover the plus 6.5, so that worked out. So yeah. Now we've got, and then the Buffalo game. What a game! What a game by Lamar Jackson. What in terms of just grind, like hero ball. Like Josh Allen did not have a great passing game. 22 passes attempted for 127 yards. That's not good. But he scored both touchdowns, 10 carries for 20 yards. They had 273 total yards of offense. He supermaned that team. He was literally team on his shoulders. And again, what did it come down to in this game? No turnovers for Buffalo, 3 for Baltimore. Lamar turned it over twice. And, you feel like, oh, man, you got to feel bad for Mark Andrews. A play that he makes, and much like you see, only Andrew's been doing for longer. That play that when McBride didn't score that touchdown, and with the Rams that got picked off, Mark Andrews that on that tying that would have tied the game with the 2-point conversion and just losing the ball. Man, that sucks. He should have made that play, but the fact that they were able to put themselves in that position after turning the ball over 3 times. I thought Buffalo would win, but oh wow. That was a game. That was really that was exactly what you wanted to see that out of that game. This was a Super Bowl type game that's going to lead to a Super Bowl type game between the Bills and the Chiefs this Sunday. And this is going to be fun.
Yeah, and it's one of those things you look at. You mentioned it. Lamar's efforts in the second half were heroic. And it's a conversation I always have with people. You know, people always want to be like, oh, well, you know, X, you know, when discussing Kyler Murray, you know, it's always, oh, the turnovers, and I'm like, well, you know, look at what Lamar did. Well, yeah, but he overcame that. I'm like, well,
did they though? They lost.
They lost because he threw that interception for no reason. I mean, I don't even know who he's throwing the ball to, and fumbled again. If he doesn't do that, you know, they're not down 3 scores early, right? And then you can start to look at how that game unfolds differently. But that's the thing, is like people will mostly just want to be like, well, Mark Andrews should have caught the ball. And I agree 1,000%.
And he should have. But then it's just overtime.
Right.
And then you see what happened. Though we would have seen our first playoff overtime where no matter what, touchdown or not, both teams get the ball. That would be interesting to see. That would be interesting to see for sure. But so yeah. Oh wait, I guess we did see that. We saw that in the Super Bowl already. Never
I was going to say technically.
We saw that we saw that literally last year.
But you know, it was interesting because they for the most part held Derrick Henry in check as much as you can hold Derrick Henry in check, right?
Yeah, you know, a human 5.3 yards per carry for 84 yards.
I thought it was interesting that they went so much away from the run game in the conditions and everything like that, and put it on Lamar so much. Not because Lamar can't do it; he's fantastic, obviously, but just in the conditions, it was interesting to see it that way. You know, but turnovers kill, man, and you can't overcome 3 turnovers.
And it's really, really hard. They almost did it, but even still. So we've got a matchup this weekend. We've got Washington Eagles. We've got Commanders Eagles and Chiefs Bills. Where and oddly enough, did you see this? The Eagles are now Super Bowl favorites out of the Final 4.
Yeah, it's just when you're running the ball that efficiently and that easily, it sounds, you know, it makes it sound not great. But when you're just dominating up front like that, it's really hard for other teams to compete with you. And so the books are going, I just, you know, somebody's got to stop Saquon. I haven't been impressed with Kellen Moore and the passing concepts, but when you can run for 300 yards, doesn't matter.
It's true, man. It's true. Cool. Well, let's go ahead and wrap this show up. That wraps up this edition of the Rise Up Secret podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. We'll have a little more Cardinals offseason topping later in this week. We will do our picks and predictions and best bets for the championship weekend. Until then, this is episode 635. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening. As always, we'll be back again soon.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up, See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red, See Red, and of course, Rise Up, See Red.
Rise up! Rise up! Rise